And so we'll go ahead and get started. This session is called Leading with Insight, and it's about specifically how you can use NotebookLM to transform your administrative workflows. And if you've heard me talk recently, you know that NotebookLM has become one of my most used and favorite tools. And I'm not a vendor. I don't work for any vendors, but it is a free tool that I find to be very educational, beneficial to all educators and students alike. And so this session will focus mainly on administrators. I did a teacher workflow session a few weeks ago on NotebookLM that you can find on our website. And Miss Stacy Lovedahl will be doing a student-facing NotebookLM session in 2 weeks, right, Stacy? 2 weeks? Yep. Okay. So our next webinar will be Stacy's teaching with a notebook wide open, which is also about NotebookLM. And so if you learned something today that you would like to apply to students, I encourage you to check that one out as well. And so we'll go ahead and get going. If you don't have the link to the presentation, it is in the chat. And it would be a very helpful thing to have open because there will be things to click on and copy and paste from the slide deck and the companion document. And I think both of those are dropped in the chat. And so just a quick introduction for those of you who may not know me. My name is Vera Cabero, and I'm currently the Emerging Technologies Consultant at DPI. And of course, the main emerging technology right now we're watching is artificial intelligence. And so I've been doing a lot to lead the state AI implementation plan over the last couple of years. And my colleagues Stacy and Meredith do a lot of that as well. And so my contact information is there should you need me, and we'll get right into it. Just a little housekeeping. First of all, I see some of you do have your cameras on. We love to see faces if you're comfortable with doing that. I know it's not always possible, but I do like to see that there's actually real people on the other end. And mics, we do ask that you keep those muted unless you are intending to speak. Sometimes we hear some things people don't realize we're hearing and probably don't want people hearing. So do check your mic and make sure that stays muted. I've already said the session is being recorded. I've already started that recording. And then as far as participation goes, this is a 1-hour webinar and would make a great 2 or 3 hour hands-on session where we all get to build and do, but it will be kind of fast-paced. And so depending on your familiarity with the tool and how you like to learn, you can either kind of prompt along with me, or you can just kind of watch and learn and do it later. Just learn how you learn best. And there is a Padlet that is on the document and in the presentation. If you do create something awesome you want to share, please do drop it on the Padlet for the benefit of others. Okay, so session resources. This slide has the things that have mostly been dropped in the chat or linked on those documents. There is a companion document, which again is very helpful to have open. And what I did is I used the companion document from a previous session, and I have just added a tab for this session. So today we're mostly dealing with this tab 2, which is Leading with Insight. This is the administrative tab, but you get all this other stuff for free. Okay, this is from my previous session I did on how teachers can use AI to architect their own learning. And so I left that all in there because as the lead learners in your district, it's very likely you may be working with some teachers, and those are things you can use. But this tab right here with the little Sherlock Holmes looking dude on it is going to be the one we're using today. And so as you can see, it's a lengthy tab, a lengthy document, but it has lots of prompts that you can just copy straight from here, paste into NotebookLM when we get there, and just kind of tweak them and edit them to suit you. And that saves us a lot of time as we are prompting live. And so do have that open, very helpful. And then the notebook, there is a notebook there, a NotebookLM notebook that just has all of my resources in it. And you're welcome to open that and have access to it as well. And then the Padlet for sharing is the third resource there. And so we'll look at that from time to time. But this webinar is about how administrators can go from manager mode. And I know some of you feel like firemen, like you're always putting out fires, always drowning in dense documents and PDFs, and kind of having to do some reactive communication, to hopefully shifting that to architect mode, which is building things that are sustainable, that save you time, utilizing features and things like deep research to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, and then reclaiming your strategic focus. And so the first thing I want to do, first of all, I want to just get a gauge of our familiarity with NotebookLM. And so if you would drop in the chat from FIST to 5, like none, 0 is none, through 5, how much familiarity or comfort you have in working with NotebookLM, that will give me an idea too where I need to start, because I don't want to bore anyone or leave anyone in the dust. And it looks like we have, as is like in the classroom, a pretty wide range. So I do see a 0 and a few 1s. I also see 4s and 5s. And so the good thing about NotebookLM is, even as a brand new, yep.
Let me just jump in. Are you still sharing your screen, or do you want to reshare?
I thought it was sharing my screen. If I'm not sharing my screen, then I will share it again. Thank you for letting me know, though. I thought it was still sharing. So let me fix that. I apologize for that. Hopefully it will stay shared. Please do let me know if I think I'm sharing and it stops sharing again, because I should be pretty much sharing the whole time. Oh, and now I don't have a share option. Okay, it just won't let me share my whole screen. So I'm sorry. I had it all fixed before y'all joined. That's what happens. It's law of presenting. Whatever's going to break is going to break. Okay, so I will have to share a little differently than I planned on. But hopefully you can see at least one screen now. Okay. All right. Thanks, Stacy, for letting me know. If it stops again, please do let me know. Okay. All right. So NotebookLM, for those of you who are new to the tool, as I was saying, it is something that's very easy to catch on to. So in 2 minutes, even as a brand new user, you can have your first notebook created. So I don't want you to be discouraged if you are new to it. And we will go through that process real quickly just to make sure everybody has something they can work with and use today. But it is now part of the Google core tools. And so that means that it is, if you're on your Google for Education account, your school account, you have a little added privacy and security on that account that you wouldn't have if you're signed into your personal account. And so just like your Google Drive and all of the other things on that Google for Education account, the privacy is guaranteed by Google, and you can curate any kind of content. We're going to talk about that. But NotebookLM in particular is staying grounded sources, and we'll get to that in a second. But the big thing is that you do have some added privacy, being an AI tool in particular. Google has promised that they won't train on your data, and that what you put in there will not be used to train their models, or no humans will review it. And so it has some added data protections. And so if you're familiar with other AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, all of those of course are trained on this massive data set. And when you ask a question or you query it, it is pulling from all of the information that it's been trained on to give you an answer. In NotebookLM, you're starting with a closed box. It is an empty box. When you first start a notebook, it has nothing in it, and it will only have in its database what you put in it. And so you're basically creating your own database by adding files to your notebook. And so that also makes it a little more secure, and you're getting grounded answers. It will give you, and we'll see this in action in a few minutes, a little number to click with all of the answers it gives you, and that will open up and show you exactly what document it came from and where it came from. Okay, so also want to talk about data privacy, though. We always need to be mindful of data privacy, even when we are using our school approved tools on our education accounts, because the reality is we need to be practicing data minimalization. And we need to be very mindful of our students' PII, or personally identifiable information, always. And so I want you to be mindful of that. Even in this tool, you may have permission from your CTO or someone to defy what I'm about to tell you, but if not, I wouldn't. And that is that that you should only use publicly accessible documents in it. Those are kind of the green, the go, curriculum maps, public policy, things like that. You should use caution if you're using any kind of student work, and make sure that you have truly anonymized it. And that doesn't mean just putting a black box over a student name, because that could still be machine readable. That doesn't mean hiding a row or a column or a tab in your spreadsheet, because those would still be machine readable. So you need to truly remove the data before you put it in. I do not recommend putting things like IEPs, grade books, student numbers, any kind of personal info in there, again, unless you have clearance from your district CTO or somebody. Different districts have different opinions on this. And so I think that it's something that we just need to make sure you are checking, make sure you follow the protocol in your district before you do something like that. And so the golden rule is that if you wouldn't put it on the bulletin board out in the hallway, you would need to de-identify it before uploading it. And of course, these tools being private, and we have that privacy guarantee, shouldn't ever get disclosed, but there was PowerSchool also. And so, we can't ever feel 100% secure, so we just need to protect the data. Next thing is we're going to get started and just create your own notebook. And so we're going to do one notebook together and create one that is targeted to your district. And so we're going to call this one an administrative brain, and I'm going to walk through the process in a minute. But for our folks who are brand new, it is very easy to create your first notebook. And you would start by going to NotebookLM.google.com, which we'll drop that in the chat so you don't have to type it. But if you go to NotebookLM.google.com, and I'll pull it up on my screen in a minute, it will just ask you first thing to try NotebookLM out. So I'm going to a new tab here, and I'm just going to go to NotebookLM.google. You don't even have to put the .com. And when you first open it, you just go to try Notebook. And even those folks who are familiar with Notebook, if you want to work along with me and prompt live, if you would create one, and you can kind of work along as to create the administrator brain when I'm going to demo, or if you prefer just to watch and do later, that's your preference. But so what I'm going to do first time or the 50th time is go here and just click create a notebook. And then remember, you're starting with an empty box. And so the first thing it's going to do is say, hey, I don't have any sources. Give me some sources. And so it's going to ask you to add some sources. And looky there, there's something new there popped up. So it's going to ask you to add sources. And so you can upload files, and we'll talk about the file types for a second. Anything you have on your device, you can upload. You can put web links and YouTube links, and you can actually stack them. Like you can put multiple links in at one time. You can pull things from your Google Drive. You can copy and paste text in, and you can actually even use their research feature to find sources. So maybe you're starting a brand new notebook to research something that you don't know anything about, and you can actually use this feature called Deep Research to find some sources. Okay, so I'm going to actually, instead of that, I'm going to just pull something from my computer just to get it started. I'll pull this document in. And so you can see that it will start stacking your sources on the left. You can have up to 50 sources in a notebook. You can have up to 100 notebooks. And so what I recommend is being really purposeful about what you put in your notebooks, and create a notebook for different purposes rather than just dumping everything that you want to keep in one, which is what I did to begin with. And I've had to kind of separate those out. And so once you create a notebook, you can continue adding sources on the left. And when you continue, and I'm just going to upload a few things this time just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to upload some random, Catherine Bailey will have to forgive me, some random Transylvania County documents I was downloading for our demo today. And so I can upload several of them at once.
While those are all uploading, you've got a question over here in the chat about the privacy level if you are not a Google school. Okay,
if you are not a Google school, so you're logged in, you have to log on your private account. Is that what you're saying? If you're not a Google school, you don't have that privacy guarantee. That is only if you have a Google for Education account. And so that would be different. That doesn't really mean you can't use it, but it means that you should be much more careful about what you put in it than if you were a Google school. But I think you need to be really careful anyway. So somebody said you can also find it in the waffle, okay, in the corner, okay. All right. And so you can see all of my sources are here on the left. And I'll tell you, this is the first thing, is that if you have all those sources clicked, whatever question you ask or whatever you create is going to refer to all of those sources. And so this is something I'm really bad to forget. If you only want to create something for one source, you need to unselect the rest of them and select that one. But I also want to tell you, for anybody who's new and you might be tempted to go over here and start clicking these buttons and creating things in your studio, you are limited in creations. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit later about how to customize those and get really good results. And so I wouldn't do that just yet, because if so, when we get to the creating part, you may have used up all your results for the day. And so I'll hold off on that if you don't mind. And we'll talk about all of these, but this is your sources over here on the left. This is your chat. And then this is what they call the studio, which we are going to get into, but just hold off on it. And so in the chat, just like if you were in Chat GPT, you can come in here and you can ask questions. And so I've uploaded a bunch of random documents, but I'm actually going to go to one that I have more purposefully created with actual documents. And so I'm going to open up this demo, and this is going to be the first demo. We're going to walk through this in a second, how to create this. And actually, I'm going to do that first. I'm going to go back to this, and then we'll get back to that demo in a second. So what we just did is we went to NotebookLM, created a notebook. We added some sources, and then we're ready to start chatting. So just like you would do in ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, you can chat with it, and it's only going to pull your answers from those sources. And so what kind of sources you can add has changed recently. You can now add Google Sheets. That was not something you could previously do. You can add Word documents. That was new. And then lots of new image types that you used to not be able to add that you can add now. You can add PDFs and you can add Google files, and the Google files will stay up to date. And I'll show you how to do that as well. But I'm going to move along to get to the right part. I do want to talk about these usage limits again. I've already kind of referenced it, but you have 100 notebooks, 50 sources per notebook, 500,000 words per source. So you can put some really hefty material in these notebooks, and the notebooks can hold a lot. I actually had to delete some of mine because I had more than 100, but most people, it's going to take you a long time to get there. As far as the things you can create, you can have 50 daily chat queries, and this is all for the education account. You can only create 3 audio or video generations a day. So again, that's why I say be careful not to just go clicking those, because they'll just start creating and you can't really stop them. And you can do 10 deep research queries monthly, 10 reports a day, 10 quizzes a day, 10 flashcards a day. And that's the current limits is in early 2026. And so you do want to be mindful about what you're creating. And then we've already kind of looked at the 3 different panels, and you can update your Google Docs dynamically. And this kind of shows the process. Just going to go in and do it live and show you what that looks like. And so I'm going to go into a different notebook. And this one is the one that I have linked in the document, the deep dive notebook. And I have a Google document here at the bottom that's easy to find. That's one thing. Sometimes when you get a lot of sources, they're hard to find, but I put an emoji at the beginning of it, makes it a little easier to find. And I haven't updated this since I added that new tab for today's session. And so what I need to do to update it is just click the source in the panel. And then notice when you do that, you'll get an icon up here to click it. And so right here, you'll see that right there where it says click to sync with Google Drive. And when I click that, it will sync. And in just a minute, it will tell me it's up to date, and then it will have that new tab that I added. And so that's one reason I really encourage you to utilize Google Drive if you're a Google school, because it's so much easier than having to delete things and re-upload them, or can't remember if it has the recent versions in it. And so that's an important feature that I want to make sure and point out. The next thing I'm going to go into is when you're asking for things. Well, first of all, let's go in and just do some prompting and querying it, and I'll demonstrate that for you. but let's see, which one do I have open? The admin brain one right here. And so this is the one where I have all kinds of Transylvania County school stuff. That's where I live and that's where I used to teach. So I just went in and downloaded like all the publicly available stuff I could find from Transylvania County to demonstrate what we're going to do in a second. But for those who are new, I wish that banner would get out of the way. There's a chat bot down there that's hiding behind my Apple banner, and I don't know why it won't move, but there's a chat bot there where you can go in and go away. Why will that not go away? Okay, let's try that again. Okay, so I just moved it above it. So there's a chat bot here. I can go in and ask questions. And so if I want to know what is Transylvania County Schools attendance policy or whatever I want to ask it, and I'm yelling at it now, sorry, put the caps on. Then I can ask a question. It will query all of the sources because I have all of them selected. And then in a minute, it's going to give me an answer, and I'll show you what I mean by the grounding. And then we're going to get into actually building one. Now, the purpose of this notebook, while it's developing the answer for me, an admin brain notebook, if you think of like a founder's brain in a company, and I don't know how many of you are principals or, well, even if you're not, like I know ITFs, you're probably getting a lot of questions too. So the purpose of this is if you can put all of your knowledge base in, and instead of people and teach your users to use it, instead of people coming and emailing you and having to wait for an answer or you having to field the emails, you can give this to them, you can share it with them, and then they can go to it and ask their questions instead. And so it's called an admin brain. And so you would want to, whether you were at a school or a district or whatever the case is, put all of the relevant documents, all the policies, all the things that people ask you questions about in it, and then share it with your users. And they could come to it and they could ask their questions and get their answers just like this. But also you can create some specific tools over here in the studio that you can share with them. Like this one is an audio podcast about the strategic plan for those users that maybe didn't actually read it and they might listen to it on the way to work. And so it's like a 10-minute podcast. This one is, and you can look at these if you have the notebook open as well. Oh, I didn't share this one. I'll have to share it with, especially you, Catherine. But this is a slide deck that I created. And all I did was all the resources you see there. I'll show you my prompt in a second, but I went in, that's a different one that I wanted to show. This one is the one I wanted to show. And so I gave it a style guide, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I said, create, here is my prompt. And so, oh, that one didn't have a prompt. This one, I just gave it the strategic plan and told it to create a slide deck. And so you can see here that it breaks down the strategic plan beautifully, put some graphics. I gave it the hex codes for Transylvania County Schools logos and a style guide and told it to create these things. And so it does a really good job of kind of going through and pulling out those priorities of the strategic plan. And I did this in about 3 minutes. And if I had created this myself, it would have taken a ridiculous amount of time and it wouldn't have looked very nice. And so these are the kinds of things as an administrator that you can do to really make your workflow more seamless. And so the other one that I created is right here, I think. And you can see the prompt on it, and I can kind of make that bigger. But basically, the key to it is making sure that you don't just click slide deck, that you do customize the prompt. And so you can see there's a prompting framework that I'm going to show you in a minute, but you go in here and you be very intentional and specific about what output you want and give it a lot of details. And so I asked for a high-level overview of the strategic plan to present to the Board of Education, breaking it down into 4 plan priorities. Each goal within the priority include the goal, action item, key measures, and metrics, cover all major cover all of them. And then I want it professional, clean, lots of white space for easy visibility. And then this is a real key to getting consistently styled outputs is I keep on a Google Keep my style guide. And when I'm creating, I go in and I just copy and paste it in there. And I looked up Transylvania County style guide and used a little eyedropper tool to get their hex codes. And so you can actually drop the hex codes in there. And so the colors you see in that actually match the branding. And that's a really great time-saving tool, but only if you really customize those prompts so that you get what you want. Because a lot of times just pushing the button, you're going to get something super generic and not as useful. So I'm going to go back to this for just a second, and then we're going to actually go in and create that one. But when you're prompting for anything, try to remember that if you'll give it a role, specify the audience, give it a specific task and an output format. Tell it what you want, like in a slide deck. I want 10 slides. I want to make sure every single objective is covered. I want all of those things that you saw in that prompt. Being very intentional and mindful about building a good, solid prompt will really help you. And then any kind of constraints, if there are any rules you want it to follow, like no jargon, maybe no the short words that I can't think of that confuse everyone. Acronyms. Thank you, Stacy. This is my second brain. I can't ever think. So no acronyms, that confuses people. So you can give it constraints and things like that, and it will follow them usually pretty well. And so this one also, and this is a really good strategy. I already mentioned that I recommend doing multiple notebooks for multiple things, but recently they've set it so that you can customize the whole notebook. And so you can make the notebook behave a certain way. And any of you that have ever customized your chat and Chat GPT, this is basically the same thing. You can give it some parameters to keep from having to repeat yourself. And so this one is an instructional designer one, but that's not the one I used on this notebook. But to set your custom prompt, I'm going to go back to this one a second and show you. If you go to this little settings icon up here in the corner and click it, it's going to come up, first of all, default, which is blank. A learning guide is more like a student use where you're using it to learn something. But if you go to custom, then you can paste your own prompt in. And this prompt is in the document, in the deep dive document, if you want to see it. Let's see, where is it? Here it is. Right there. So this is the prompt that I used. It's on that second tab. I've modified it a little bit because it's for a county instead of a school, but it tells it to be the director of operations and policy expert for the school. And the goal is to provide accurate policy-based answers to staff questions regarding institutional procedures. And then give it directives according to, start every sentence citing the specific document and page number, policy versus procedure, distinguish between the rule and the action, state the policy. Second, provide a numbered list of steps the staff member must take. The human in the loop clause, if a query involves subjective judgment, can I take personal leave the day before spring break? You must state the policy, but add final approval rests with the administrator. Neutrality, do not offer opinions on rules, state them clearly. And then the tone, efficient, authoritative, and helpful. Think reference librarian meets chief of staff. And so my whole notebook is trained to behave in that way. And so when I ask something about a policy, from then on, it's going to do that. And if anytime you want to go back and change that and edit it, you can go back in there and adjust it again. And then from that point on, it will follow those new rules. I will tell you, I tried to put style guide in there and it doesn't follow style guide yet. Maybe it will eventually. And so I do copy and paste that every time. It does, for whatever reason, it won't follow those directions as of yet. Okay. And so this would be a very, very helpful thing for any administrator, for your tech teams, keeping those incident response plans and all those things that need to be done. We lose so much institutional knowledge with turnover when people leave and things like that, or just a lot of time is wasted with people asking questions that they could get answers for something like this. But if you create something like this for your own district, your own school, or your own department or whatever, the next thing is to make sure you operationalize it by sharing it. And in an educational setting, yes.
Before jump over to the chat, we've answered a couple of questions, but Lucas had a comment about the functionality in Google Workspace, and I wasn't sure if it.
Okay, I've also seen a demo of exporting as a PDF and opening in Canva. Yes, yes, and there's several slides on the end of it that you can use Canva to manipulate it, including making it accessible, Lucas. I have discovered that you can use the grab text feature and then select all text and it allows you to edit the text, but it also makes the text readable on screen readers. And so I do a lot of that. And there are some tips on that at the end of the slide that I don't know if we'll get to today. But that's how I utilize mine, is exporting them to Canva. There's also several extensions you can use to export them as PowerPoints and things like that. But exporting them to Canva makes them the most editable. Okay. Did that answer your question? This is like 6-point text in my chat.
And then I think if you scroll a little bit further down there was a question about the functionality in Workspace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Lucas put the ability to edit just dropped, and I do have that on my personal account. I just saw it today for the first time, and they've been promised that's coming, but I tried it out today, and of course it is brand new, but it didn't work exceptionally well today. But it should be coming to I'll show you it, but it's not going to be in your educational account yet, but I will demonstrate it anyway, what Lucas is talking about. And so notice right here where I have this revise button, I don't have it in my education account yet, but when I've created that, they've been promising they're going to make them editable. And so when I click revise, you'll get this in the, hopefully the near term. You can like recommend changes right here, like change the image on the page or make the title shorter. I noticed on one slide, like it sometimes it likes to report the font it uses for some reason, and it had that on there, and I asked it to erase that. And so they've been promising that's coming. And so fingers crossed, hopefully we'll get to education soon as well. But right now it's a little buggy like Gemini is when you create an image in Gemini or ChatGPT for that matter and ask for revisions. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But with it just dropping, I'm sure it will get better. Okay, so somebody else from the article, Lucas shared Google Ads that you can now export slide decks in the PPT format. Yeah. And those are all things that are dropping now in the private accounts that will be coming hopefully eventually to the educational accounts. And usually they're pretty fast to ship. So hopefully those will come soon. But I do want to just demonstrate a few other things that I've created from this. First of all, I showed you the slide deck, but I've also like the new wireless school policy. Of course, it's not new now, but imagine in August, if I really needed to share this out, I can use that document as a reference, and I can create things like infographics. And I didn't put the brand colors in this one, I just kind of created it. But this is one where I ask it to create an infographic detailing, and you can show the prompt on any of these, create a social media infographic directed at parents that summarizes the new wireless communication policy in parent-friendly language, include reasoning behind it and possible positive outcomes, clear plan for infractions. And so you can do things like that also. And it does a really good job. And I could have added those branding guidelines to it, but I created those afterwards. And I am going to share this notebook with you, and I'm going to put it in the chat so you can explore it with me, with the caveat that I'm using my personal account because I do these trainings for people in different districts, so that I can share them. You will not be able to share it outside of your district on your education account. But I am going to do that so you can have access to it. I'm going to make it a public document, which you also cannot do on a school account, but you can share it within your district. And so I'm just going to drop this. It's all public information, Catherine, from Transylvania County. Things I pulled off the website. So I'm not sharing anything private, but that way you can kind of see and explore some of these things that I've created. Another thing that I've done, I've created a podcast, infographics, reports, and we're going to talk about some of these things, get back to the slide deck in a minute. But this is another thing, like parent communication. I know if you're an administrator, you do a lot of parent communication. And so this one, I just ask it to create a partnership guide telling parents about their rights in the school setting based on all of this information that I've fed it. And it did a really good job. And this time I did give it the style guide, I believe. But you can see it talked about the commitment. It starts off with kind of positive, and I gave it some specifics, but the Parents' Bill of Rights, achievement and curriculum, FERPA, student records, surveys and PPRA, the health rights, technology and digital citizenship. And so it pulled all of this stuff from the sources I had given it. And again, if you're in the notebook, you can go up and look at my custom prompt. It will show you the prompt, and you can see what I've asked for is a parent guardian resource slide deck with an extra K there, that includes all parent rights and procedure from the resources, including, and I gave it some specifics, prevent school as a partner dedicated to the student's best interest, parent-friendly language, professional, clean, and I actually hadn't given it the color yet, but it did a pretty good job with matching the colors. And so think of the things that you can create. This is a real creation engine for administrators. But sharing that, like if you create this admin brain or whatever, tech team brain, whatever it is that you want, you do want to share it with your people and teach them to use it. And so just like I shared it with you a minute ago, if you go in and put your mailing list in there and then open it up in a staff meeting and encourage people to go in and start using it to ask their questions, you'll get a copy link that will work, and you can either give them full access, which would allow them to see all these resources and have their own private chat, and they could see all of the studio elements. But if you go to chat only, it acts like a chat bot, and all they see is the line. They don't see the resources or the studio elements, and they can just ask questions and it will give them answers. So I would recommend making it the full notebook only. Share it out with your staff, and then teach them to use it and start expecting them to use it. If they, send you an email, say, did you try the NotebookLM? And I think it could be a real time saver for you. So that's my number one administrator use case. But we also have several others in the slide deck that I'm going to go through and discuss with you. This is just a little reminder of how to do that. So this is the admin work brain. This is the prompt, which you should be able to copy straight from there, but it's also in that document. And again, it's just to kind of relieve that bottleneck, but we won't talk about that one anymore. We'll move along. How to share your notebook. I've demonstrated that for you. But again, for Google users, sharing is domain restricted on a Google Education account. And your students will not be able to use NotebookLM unless they specifically, their group has been allowed by administrators. Some schools in North Carolina are allowing 6 to 12 students. I think Catherine said Pennsylvania is, a few more are, and it is a great tool for students, but just don't expect that students will be able to access it without checking with your CTO or whoever manages your Google account. The deep research feature I already mentioned, and those are limited to 10. So we don't want to burn those up just playing around, but I do want to highlight that for you. You probably have encountered deep research in Gemini or in ChatGPT. They brought it into NotebookLM as well. And again, it can be used to generate a brand new notebook from scratch on something you want to learn about. Maybe you're starting to explore agentic AI, or maybe your district is starting to explore project-based learning or something like that. You can use that feature to do that, and I'll go back in and show you in a minute. But deep research prompting is a little different, and this is a framework I've created for deep research prompting to get the best results. You really need to have a little more information than a regular prompt. So I recommend a driving question and a goal to begin with. What do you expect of the evidence? So you want to specify sources for that. Like, do you want only peer-reviewed, only major educational organizations? What sources are you after? The process and the task that you want, the expected format of your output. You want to make sure and tell it what kind of output you want. And it will give you outputs in, MLA format, APA. You could specify that as well. Specify you want footnotes or endnotes or whatever you want, you can specify it. But also the references and the rigor, you want to make sure you specify that formation, how you want it formatted. I've already said that. But the scope, that's the one I missed, the extent and scope, the time period. Like if I was going to research PBL today, I would limit it to 25 beyond because it's different with AI. And so you want to give it some specifics, geography, maybe grade bands for what you want to use it for. And so before you run one of your 10 deep research report prompts, I would really spend some time developing that prompt using a framework like this to make sure you get the best results. But and there is a prompt in here for deep research. And it is the third tab, and that's the same little format right there. And so I've got one here, kind of a blank one that you can fill in, but there is an example one right here. Act as a curriculum director, preparing a strategic briefing for K-12 coaches, conduct deep research on the evolution of project-based learning from 24 to the present. And so you can see that kind of breaks down that strategy. And if I wanted to run that, I could go into Gemini or anywhere else and run it. But if I want to build a notebook around that, I could go in and start a brand new notebook, and I could create my own resources by, first of all, instead of adding resources, using, and I would recommend using the deep research, and then just paste that prompt right in. I've already got my prompt developed, but I specify what kind of sources I want, the date, the time, how I want the output formatted, and so forth. And I could run that, and it will go and agentically find those sources for me and kind of create my data set and let me approve them. And so I do sometimes do that if I'm trying to learn about something new. And that's a powerful use case for an administrator as well. Okay, so we already kind of talked about, don't just go click the buttons in the studio, because it will just create generic things. But all of those things in the studio give you the ability to customize them, except for the mind map. Everything else in the studio you can customize. And so you'll want to make sure and use that power to get exactly what you want, and not just burn up your limited number of use cases. And this is just some other things like here about using your visual consistency, copy and paste that little, like what I've done. If I go to Google Keep, I just keep style guides on my Google Keep. Like here's the one I created for Transylvania County. And every time I wanted to create something, I could copy that style guide, and that would give me that consistency using the hex codes. I have one for the DPI also. So I do recommend doing that, and that will help, and drop that in. But so I think all of the rest of this has kind of been said already, but just to kind of put it into perspective in a notebook, that's a blank one. I'm going to close it. See over here where you have the pencils, this is where I'm talking about. And if you're not really careful, you'll accidentally click one of these and run one of your reports. And so you have to be very intentional about clicking the pencils. And then that opens it up, and it lets you have this box to type in. And you have some choices: concise, standard, or detailed, landscape, portrait, or square, depending on how you want to use it, and different languages. It does a pretty good job of translating things. If you're trying to make things in multiple languages for your families, you can also do that. But this is where you want to put your prompt, and that prompt can be up to 10,000 characters. And so you can really do some customizing with that. But if, for example, the 10,000 characters is not enough, like I've created this whole slide deck with NotebookLM, and 10,000 characters wouldn't do it because I specify what I want on the slides. You can put a Google Doc, add a Google Doc as a source, and reference that source. Just have that source selected and say, follow the directions in this Google Doc, and create a slide deck using all of the information in that doc and following it exactly. And it will follow that Google Doc. And so that's a way to beat the 10,000 characters if you run into that as an issue. And so that's how you customize it. All of them, the reports and the video overviews, don't have a pencil, but if you click the report, it opens up and it shows you 4 different options at the top. And then these bottom ones where it says loading suggestions, those are context aware, meaning they're going to look at the sources you have, and they're going to decide what might she want to create, or he, based on the sources there, and it will give you some ideas. And reports is a really good feature. They're not flashy. It doesn't create images, but for a busy administrator, things like implementation roadmaps, instructional design, active learning primer, visual narrative, or you can just go in and create your own. And so you can go in and put a prompt in there and create your own. And I do have some report prompts in this document. If you go back to the number 2 prompt, there's some chat prompts, just some ways to interact with it. Different, like here's some tailored reports, like ideas of how you might create a report. Like maybe you're taking a dense policy, a district policy, and you want to break it down for families. And then you want a different version of that for your staff. And maybe you need a version of that you're going to report to the school board with, or a version for students. This really lets you kind of customize it depending on the audience, and describe exactly what you want in those reports. And another thing that I want to show you is called chaining prompts. When you create something like that, and I'm just going to reference one I've already created because of time. I created this institutional memory, like directions for this. Okay, so if I wanted to, like after I have created that, I can go over here and convert it to a source. And when I convert it to a source, it puts it over here. It is a little bit hard to find though when you got a lot of sources. Once it puts it over there, it gets creative with the naming. So sometimes you have to find it. But when you find it and you select only that item, and I have lost it, but when you select only that item, then you can go and create a studio output from just that item. And so that's also a really good skill to kind of customize things based on the source that you're giving it. And when you have a chat too, like I've got a chat here, if this was a really useful chat, and that's actually how I got it over there, you can save it to a note first. And then when you have it saved to a note, then convert it to a source, then select it as a source and go up and you can create a studio output from that source. And so I found that to be very useful, to really customize things down to a certain really very specific level. And it is already 4:15, so I'm going to move along. I do want to spend a few minutes though, because again, the generations are limited. And it takes a little time to learn how to build a really good prompt. I built a gem, which is a custom chatbot using Gemini that will help you to create a really good, strong prompt so that you can get exactly what you want the first time. And so we're going to drop that into the chat. But if you would click it and open it, and I'm just going to drop it in the chat so you have it to click real quickly. And if you open this gem, it is trained on all my NotebookLM information about how to prompt and everything. And so it will ask you first, what do you want to create? Audio overview, video overview, infographic, etc. And of course, it has to be based on the sources in your notebook. But you can tell it what you want to create, and it will kind of pull information out of you to get the information that it needs. And so I'm going to say, because I'm looking at Transylvania County, I want an infographic that explains the AI policy to 6 to 12 students. Okay, so I tell it what I want, and then I enter it, and it will ask me any other questions it wants, like about style and things like that. It sounds like a great project. Who is the primary audience? When I said that, it ignored me, but what specific tone should we strike in engaging and pro-tech or more cautious and safety first? I'm going to say a balanced tone for grades 6 to 12. And then this is where I might drop my style guide in there and say that I want to follow this style guide. And so I can say to follow my style guide, which I have copied, so I can just paste it in. And then any other questions it asks. And then it will create you a really good prompt, and you can just copy and paste it and then go click that pencil on whatever artifact you're wanting to create. And chances are you'll get a much better output than you would if you'd have just went there and said, you know, create me an infographic about this. It will kind of pull those things out of you. So here it gives me branding style and constraints, the task, the role of the task, the branding constraints, the content requirements, the tone. And so I can just copy that whole thing, go back to my TCS brain demo, and that was an infographic. So instead of just clicking there, I'm going to click the pencil and go into my pencil or into my custom things. And then I just pasted that prompt in, specifying, and of course I could edit it. If you don't like it exactly, you can edit it, but I'm just going to generate so you can see it generating. Now for an infographic for students though, you might want to go with concise. That will make it a little less wordy. And you can change also, if you want to hang it in the hall, you might want it to be portrait. So you can change those things up. You want it on social media, you might want to do square. If I do them in my presentations, I usually use them for landscape. And so I'm going to generate that, and you'll see that kind of does a little roundabout, and then it starts spinning. And it does take a while to generate, but you can generate multiple things at a time. And so while it's spinning and generating, you can start generating something else and something else and something else, go to a different notebook, generate something else. And I generally do that. I get several things going, sometimes in multiple notebooks at the same time. Okay, so talked a lot. I'm going to go back to this for just a second while that's generating, and we will come back and look at it. Has everybody had an opportunity to open the gem and try it? We might just give a couple of minutes pause and let you work with it and get your own prompt so that you can have something to paste in and have something created before you leave. And then we'd love to see anything that you do get created on that Padlet. And I'll open that up so that if anybody puts anything on it, we'll be able to see it. It's on that first page. And this document is a wealth of information and resources. So I'm going to open that up if anybody shares anything on it. I wonder if that's the same one I put in the presentation though. Okay, thank you, Meredith, putting the Padlet in there. And if anybody has something to say, a question or just a comment about the gem or the prompt you're working on, please feel free to just come off mute. It's not a huge crowd, so we should be able to do that while we're waiting about another minute. Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. It will take a few days, but we put all of our videos on our website, NCDPI AI Resources website, and you can watch all of our archived videos on there. And so we'll drop that chat in there in a minute. It'll have the presentation. The video will be there, but it takes a few days to go through processing, get uploaded to YouTube and edited and all of that. But we do share all of those. And if Stacy or Meredith, one of y'all don't mind pulling that resource up and dropping it in there, that would be great. And we only have about 9 minutes left, so I am going to speed along, but I just will point out that once you have used that gem, when you go back to your Gemini, it will live over here in your gem. So once you open it up, you should see it again. You should be able to see the ones that you've used and be able to go in and use it again. Okay. And so you're welcome to use that as much as you want. Gems are free, easy to share, easy to use, and it really does help. It's trained on a lot of good information to help make sure the prompts are specific enough to net a good result. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move along. Anybody who wants to share, please do drop some in the Padlet, and we'll kind of remember to go back and check on those. Any questions or comments before we leave this? Has everybody had the opportunity to get a prompt created and started? Let's see if mine actually finished yet. No, mine's still spinning, so we'll come back to it. Any kind of generation like this does take a bit of time, but we'll try to remember to go back and look at it. What I have next is a bunch of other possible use cases for administrators, and all of these prompts are in that Google Doc, and you can also copy from here, but just to kind of give you ideas, and I'm sure you guys could probably give us some ideas, which we'd love to hear if you have other ideas on how to use them. But one is like a board ready executive briefing. You could take a dense document like a board policy and create either an audio output, a video output, or an actual document, an infographic, whatever the case may be for the different audiences that you're dealing with. A second use case is a commute-friendly policy rollout, which I demonstrated one of those already. So I personally will listen to podcasts when I won't read things, and some staff are like that. So something maybe that people are not reading, you can create one of those podcasts and you can really customize them as well, pass and give it out so that people can listen to it. Third one is a parent pulse analyzer. The new data outputs feature is really, really helpful for that. And it does a lot better job also with spreadsheets and things now. And so you can actually pull in anonymized survey data, make sure they're anonymized, and have it analyze that and then kind of give you a data output, a data table that kind of organizes that information and gives you like a pulse check. Another one, standards to pacing guide. I pulled in Transylvania County's calendar in there. I didn't pull standards in, but if I did, if I was trying to create a pacing guide for Math 1, for whatever, I could ask it to create a pacing guide based on that calendar, give it both things, and have it create a data table output that was a pacing guide. Things like that you can do. The vision synthesizer, this one is taking just raw brainstorming notes because of the different image files it can read now. It can even read my handwriting, and that's a stretch for most people. You can just take snapshots of your messy notes or whatever, and it can actually read them. Actually, my husband was impressed one time it read his handwriting, which is even worse than mine. And so it really can, it can kind of synthesize all those notes and things together. Next one, the grant compliance officer. If you're trying to apply for a grant, you know, they've all got very specific requirements. You could put in the grant requirements, put in your draft of the grant, and have it kind of identify gaps and analyze it for compliance to the grant and likelihood of winning the grant. New hire onboarding bot, kind of like the admin brain one. It's very difficult to keep up with those new employees that come in. So you could have a notebook set aside specifically with all the things that a new employee needs to know and share it with them, teach them how to use it also, create some studio outputs to help them. Strategic planning deck. We've already kind of looked at that. Like you can ask it to create like a McKinsey style presentation and give it some parameters around. And I showed you one on the Transylvania County strategic plan, kind of similar. Deep research investigator, we've talked about that already. Discipline pattern detector, like you could put, of course, anonymized data in there about where different discipline incidents happen and what kind of incidents they are. And it can kind of pull out some insights about where the hot spots are, the hot times and things like that. And so that's just 10 ideas. There are a million. But just remember to help yourself, you can really build systems, not just managing tasks. And these tools can really help you with that, using that studio to transform content, using the chat to analyze and synthesize data, using the sharing to create those self-serving tools that your employees can use, and students eventually when we get there. Stacy will teach you more about that next time. And then the deep research. And so architects, they don't just lay every brick, they design the structure that stands. And so that's why I've kind of used that analogy of an architect. And we do value your feedback. I'm going to stay on the call if anybody wants to chat. And I'm going to look at the comment there in a second, but we do have a feedback form, and we really appreciate when people supply feedback. We use that to create new webinar topics from and to improve and change and things like that. So I'm going to drop that in the chat, and I'm going to try to read Chris's 6-point prompt there, or question. One of the problems with GEMS is that I can never see the results from previous uses. The same prompt in Gemini stays there in your history. Should that, okay, well, they might have changed that because I can see previous uses. And so if I go into that again, let me find that link to that. If I go into, where did it go? Okay. Let me see where it went. It was keeping the gems there. Did it stop doing that, y'all? Okay.
Vera, I found I have to use it at least one time for it to get saved in my left-hand side there.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. So there's my prompt.
Sorry.
Oops. I don't know what I did, but it was there. Let me go back to not sharing not double screening. Separate the views. And so it was there, but it's in your chat history. It goes into your chat history. So this is what I created a few minutes ago. This was with that bot. And so it does save it. And then you can see when I first loaded it, I could see my previous chats with that gem too on the screen where I had used it previously, but it just saves them down here into your chat history. Okay. Now I've got everything expanded huge. So, okay. Any other questions that I've missed, or anybody just want to come off mute and ask a question or a comment or anything? We have still about 2 minutes, which for me, that's right on. Usually 10, not nearly finished at the end of time. And so I do want to tell you there is a presentation template. I like to share that. This will let you make your own copy. This is your tax dollars at work. We work for you. So if you want to make a copy of that and change it up, you're always welcome to do that. Acknowledgments about my AI use, but there's also some bonus things at the end. Lucas mentioned earlier about pulling them into Canva for editing. And so there's some kind of expert tips at the end about different types of studio outputs, but there's also some specifics in here about how to pull these files into Canva to make sure you can edit them and make them accessible and things like that. And so those are at the very end of the slide deck if you're also a Canva user and those are of interest to you. Hopefully soon we'll be able to edit them right in NotebookLM and all of that won't be necessary. But right now I usually do find a repeated word or something that I want to change, and I usually will pull them in, and also to make them accessible so that they meet accessibility requirements. Okay, now I'm going to stop talking and see if anyone has any questions or anything. And if not, y'all have a wonderful afternoon, and we will get this recording up on the website as soon as possible, which Meredith did drop in the chat there. Thank you, Lila. It's always good to see you. And Lucas, thank you.
Vera, I love your idea of making like almost like a template. That's sort of what I'm leading a PD that Stacy's helping me with on March 17th with NotebookLM. And so you gave me an idea of helping them create, the media specialists create a NotebookLM that's sort of ongoing throughout the year, where they can put in like their data, and then they can have it as a talking point for their principals when they meet at the year. Because, you know, times with that, the school library media evaluation instrument, the principals just don't, you know, sometimes it's hard to know what media specialists do because principals go in and observe while they're teaching. But if media coordinators had a visual, you know, that was like, here's the data, here's what I've done, here's a podcast you can listen to about, you know, I just think it could really go a long way. And I think for me too, in this role as district librarian, I'm trying to do a lot more with that data piece and how that data helps to tell a story. And so anyway, so thank you for talking.
Great. I'm glad that you got an idea from it. And Stacy will be right there, get you straight. She's really good with it as well. So
yeah.
Okay. Excellent. I do see someone shared something, the reliable raccoon, whoever you are. Thank you. The anonymous aardvark. I appreciate it. A ELA standards coach infographic. And so I'm just going to pull that up. Stacy, was that you by chance?
I am absolutely the reliable raccoon. Thank you very much. And how could you tell? Is it because I'm obsessed with my AI standards coaches? But yeah, I really love the way that's based on the gem. I prompted the gem, just like you said, and because I was in a hurry, I didn't read it because, you know, we're under the gun here, you know, to get done. But I really love how it took the DPI branding colors. It used a little bit of that. I told it to make it really clear, and I think I clicked concise, so it's not too wordy. So yeah.
Very good. Okay. Anybody else have anything creative? We would love to see it. I think it gives other people ideas too. I think it's always great sharing. And so that Padlet is open. If anybody wants to add anything to it, please do. And we're happy to stick around for a few minutes if anybody has any questions.